What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Elijah Talks Ball. We are breaking down what's going on in the NFL over the past few days. The Giants benched Daniel Jones. What are they going to do? Are they looking in the draft? You would think so. So we're going to break down that. And then, of course, it wouldn't be football talk if we didn't talk about the Jets and their plan after firing their GM, Joe Douglas. What's this mean for Aaron Rodgers and the head coach search? A lot up in the air for both New York teams. And then we're also going to talk about college football playoff. The top 12 came out. We're going to give you what teams we think are going to go in, the favorites, and then we're going to hit you with some wild cards. So like and subscribe, comment down below, and let's jump on into this party. So Daniel Jones benched for the remainder of the season. He will be inactive. This is similar to what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson, where if he ends up getting injured over the rest of this season, they owe him a certain amount of money that obviously they don't want to pay him because he's not in their future plans. They've tried to ride this thing out, but that Carolina Panthers game in Germany was just the last straw. I got up like a sicko and decided to watch it. Brian Daboll has done an incredible job at keeping his cool because you can tell he was as pissed as you can possibly get. He's done a great job scheming things open for Daniel Jones, for Tommy DeVito, and now for Tommy DeVito again. But they also have Drew Lock on their roster. I'm sure he'll get a little bit of airtime. I don't think the Giants are going to move on from Brian Daboll because if you think about it, when he came over to the team, they didn't have a ton of weapons. You know, they did have Saquon Barkley, but the version we're seeing of him with the Eagles, I mean, is the full potential due to the nice offensive line and then the complementary weapons on the outside with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So, quite frankly, Brian Daboll got this Giants team into the playoffs, upset the Vikings on the road in the wild card round with Daniel Jones. And we know they decided to reach on DJ back in the draft where, you know, I don't mind. Swing big. You know, we saw Josh Allen, 6'6", 240 pounds, very raw, under 60% completion percentage during his time at Wyoming. Daniel Jones. People don't realize this. He's got a similar frame to Josh Allen. Big, tall, strong dude, nice arm. And you can tell when he's on, he looks like a pro quarterback. He can make these throws, but just more often than not, he has guys running wide open, as Brian Daboll does a great job with his scheme, and he doesn't pull the trigger, which is obviously the number one issue as a quarterback. You have to be able to sit in the pocket, read it, and rip it. That's the biggest issue to me for Caleb Williams and guys that I'm a little bit worried about coming out like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. They want to play hero ball. They want to step back. If it's not open within 2 to 3 seconds, run around, exhaust your offensive lineman, and try to make a big play. But what we've seen from Jaden Daniels, from Bo Nix, and from Drake May is they are willing to take the underneath route. You're going to give them a 6-yard out or a 5-yard spot over the center. They're going to take it every day because 10 plays times 5 yards, 50 yards. You'll take that every single drive. So I get a little bit worried coming up in the draft because obviously Daniel Jones is no longer in their future plans. So they're looking to the draft, you could assume. And the top two quarterbacks, consensus-wise, is Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. And I've watched a lot of Colorado football, and then obviously I watched the highlights for Miami. I've watched a couple full games, but I haven't done any deep dives just with the eye test and not even watching the all 22. You see a lot of plays where you get a little bit iffy on whether these guys are going to make it in the NFL or not. Cam Ward, electric arm. Shedeur Sanders, electric arm. They both can rip it and make any throw on the field. But a guy like Brian Daboll, a guy like Kyle Shanahan, you know, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, they don't want you running around and creating all these plays. Obviously, if you have to, do it. That's why Jaden and Drake May have found success, is because they want to play from within the pocket, but they will create if it needs to happen. These guys want you to run their offense. Sean Payton had an issue with Russell Wilson last year. It's because he wasn't just doing what he said. If you draw up a play The goal of the play is not to drop back, have things get covered, and then run around for 6 seconds and make a big play. Nobody would be successful doing that. The whole point of drawing up an offense is, okay, I'm going to scheme these guys open. And you have to be able to stand in the pocket and rip it over the middle. And we've seen flashes of that with Shedeur and with Cam Ward. I think it was the Virginia Tech game when Cam Ward was coming back. He ripped a beautiful skinny post over the middle for a touchdown. And Shedeur just last week against Utah had a beautiful layered throw over the linebacker in front of the safety. These are NFL type throws that you're going to have to be more comfortable making in the NFL, because the athletes, they're faster, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're smarter on top of everything, and the schemes are more brilliant. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I've seen out of Drake May coming out of college is that he was one of the most efficient passers going over the middle, which is just where you're going to win when it comes to the NFL. So to me, a better fit for Brian Daboll's system, and we saw the success that he had with with Josh Allen in Buffalo, which was what led him to becoming the head coach of the Giants. I look at a guy like Jalen Milroe. I see something similar to what happened to Lamar, where a team trades up late into the first round, gets him for that 5th-year option, and unless he goes crazy over these next, 5 weeks, including the college playoff, I don't see him going in the top 10, not even top 15. There's just a lot of raw potential there that with Shedeur, yeah, you can nitpick him. With Cam Ward, sure, you have things that you don't like. There's very rare, perfect prospects, especially at the quarterback position, but you have a lot to work with. You've seen that they can execute an NFL offense. Sometimes they just get a little bit too creative and they don't want to play within the construct. But Jalen Milroe, the thing with him is you can tell his mindset. He wants to play from the pocket. And I think that's the issue of why they struggled against Tennessee, why they lost to Vanderbilt. You see Jalen Milroe really have this internal dilemma when it comes to playing quarterback from the pocket. Yes, he wants to be that guy. And you see this with Lamar in big games as well. He wants to show that I can play from the pocket and I can win games like this. But the best attribute these guys have are their legs. And Jalen Milroe, a big, strong dude, can run. I mean, Lamar's more elusive, but Jalen has this power that is similar to Jalen Hurts. He's a little faster, but he will run you over. He's not going to get tackled by an arm tackle or, if you think you're just going to body him up, he'll run you over. And so I'd like to see the pairing between Brian Daboll and Jalen Milroe, because one thing that Jalen Milroe does amazing is he throws the ball deep better than anybody in college football right now. And Brian Daboll wants to move the ball down the field. He's not into dinking and dunking. I don't think Jalen Milroe would be good in Sean Payton's scheme. He doesn't have the touch to hit you underneath over and over and over again. But with a defense that has to honor his legs, so you have to move some linebackers or safety or a nickel corner up to kind of spy on him, that'll open some stuff deep down the field. You got Malik Neighbors, who's one of the best young deep threats in the league. You have Wan'Dale Robinson, who can create space over the middle. I think this would be a match made in heaven. And I think you can get him at a decent price to where they're going to be picking in the top 5. So now you could spend the top 5 pick on whatever position you need to fix. Your edge rusher's pretty good. Interior defensive line, pretty good. Offensive line, always help. But you could maybe get a guy like Tedoroa McMillan or Luther Burden, or add another corner. They have Travis Hunter, obviously. Not sure they're quite in the market of him, but you're not going to say no to a guy like that. But some of the corners where, Will Johnson from Michigan, I could see that pairing being perfect. Malachi Storks, free safety. Xavier McKinney, left in free agency. You replace him with a guy who could play from the slot, but also patrol the deep halves of the field. And then take your high pick in the second round, move back into the first round, get a guy like Jalen for that 5th year. and give Brian Daboll a little bit more of a runway, because I think he's a good coach. I mean, you're playing with Tommy DeVito, Daniel Jones, and he's competitive in a lot of these games. There was a point in time in this year where they were playing the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday night, and we thought, are the Giants in this thing? And it was a real game against the Cowboys, and then things just spiral. When you don't get good quarterback play, it's hard to win in the NFL. And you could blame some of that on Brian Daboll, but at the end of the day, the players got to go out and play. And there was one play that was especially evident of what Daniel Jones has struggled with. They did a nice little flea flicker, and he had Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson running wide open, like so wide open that I could have thrown it to them, and he took a sack. And you can see Brian Daboll wanted to rip his head off. So give a guy like Milroe, who has the mental wiring to want to learn how to play better from the pocket, but just don't let him lose sight of the fact that his elite trait is his speed, is his legs. So I think that would be a nice match made in heaven. He obviously doesn't mind being coached hard, playing with Nick Saban. Brian Daboll seems to kind of get after, but he seems to have calmed down a little bit. I give Milroe and Daboll another 3 years. I think they're building something. That defense, ready to play. You put a quarterback in that offense, Tyrone Tracy, the running back, has looked pretty good. So now you kind of got the makings of an offense. You've got a solid offensive line once Andrew Thomas comes back at left tackle. You drafted Theo Johnson, the tight end out of Penn State. You like where this is going. You need that athletic pocket passer who is willing to play from the pocket and not always look to extend, but does it when he needs to. I like that, because then, as well as I just said, you get to spend your top pick on another player to build that roster and then trade back in. If I'm the Giants, that's what I'm doing. Now, moving on to the Jets, I gotta say, the Giants and the Jets, both 3-8. If I had to choose one of these franchises to run for the next 5 years, I'm choosing the Giants a million times out of a million times. Joe Douglas, their GM, fired. Robert Saleh earlier in the year, fired. Aaron Rodgers, you got to think that he's next. People can say, well, his stats aren't that bad. When you watch him play, it's not the same. And quite frankly, looking back at it, why would we have thought it would be? His last year in Green Bay, they didn't even make the playoffs. They got bounced in that final game against the Lions on Sunday night. He did not have the greatest season. Now, a team like the Giants would kill for a season like that. But what we're used to with Aaron Rodgers and what the Jets and Jets fans thought they were getting with Aaron Rodgers was the 4-time MVP winner. And even a little version of that would have been nice, because he had a defense that was ready to go. And you had some nice weapons, especially adding Devontae Adams. You bring in Braylon Allen in the draft, youngest player. This team, over the past few years, has been a run-centric team. That's what they've succeeded at. You had Breece Hall, who people touted as the up-and-coming, top 5 running back. Braylon Allen, the workhorse young dude who can just run anybody over. And you had Garrett Wilson to work the slot. He brought in Alan Lazard. You draft a left tackle at Olu Fashanu, and he's sitting behind Tyrone Smith. You had Morgan Moses. You have a pretty good interior of your line. This team is meant to run the ball and play good defense. But since Aaron has come in, they've gotten obsessed with throwing the ball, and you can tell that's Aaron's doing. This quarterback that we're seeing now is just not good enough to drop back, throw it 45 times a game, and lead his team to a win. Because even though, his touchdown to interception ratio may be decent, it's like Russell Wilson last year. Yeah, he threw 24 touchdowns, only 7 picks. But watching him, it felt like 10 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. It's like this guy is not pushing the ball down the field. And even in the past game, I think he had 30 attempts, only had 195 passing yards. Watching him in the Patriots game earlier in the season on Thursday night when they whooped them 24-3, people talked, oh, Aaron's back. He's starting to get the hang of it. And I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, like, okay, yeah, if we get that version, the Jets will win a good amount of games. But teams just caught on. He was only throwing slants and out routes in that game. And that's all he's done all season long, is just drop back He sees that the defense is probably sending a backer out or sending him on a blitz, and he's just going to feed it right behind, which is smart quarterback play. But teams adapt and adjust, especially in the NFL at the most elite level. Do you really want to keep this guy on your team and hinder the chances you have moving forward? Because you have decent pieces. Now, Tyron Smith turned out not the greatest signing. You'll move on from him, but you drafted Fashanu. You still got Breece Hall. You got Devontae. You got Garrett Wilson. You have a defense that has regressed after firing Robert Saleh. But you still have pieces that you like with Sauce Gardner, Quincy Williams, Quinnen Williams. There's a lot of pieces on that defense that you feel good about. You know, Will McDonald. Jermaine Johnson will be back off of injury next year. So you have a solid defensive line. Get back to your identity. And to me, the two coaches that stand out the most to me, and one of them, I'm not sure if it would happen. The other, he would take it in a heartbeat, are Rex Ryan and Mike Vrabel. You need two guys with a fucking attitude to go be the coach of the New York Jets, especially with all the hype that comes with being a New York coach, especially the Jets over the past couple years with this whole Aaron Rodgers dilemma, and it's just spiraled so quickly downhill. They're not going to put up with the bullshit. And unfortunately, the Jets have a lot of money that they're still paying Aaron Rodgers. If they were to cut him, I think his contract goes up into 2027. The first few years is a $21 million cap hit, and then it's $77.5 million the last 2 years. I'm not sure if there's a way for you to work around that. But a guy like Rex Ryan, who already had success in New York, and Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, said he didn't want to part ways. But the new GM didn't feel comfortable with Rex Ryan. Big attitude has brought him to back-to-back AFC championships in the peak of the Ben Roethlisberger Steelers, the Tom Brady Patriots, the Joe Flacco Ravens. That was a pretty solid team, but he has the attitude to not give in to the media, to tell him how he feels, and that bleeds into the team in a positive manner. The other guy is Mike Vrabel. Now, I don't know if you can get Mike Vrabel to come coach the Jets after his long tenure with the Patriots, as they are rivals, similar to Bill Belichick. I don't think Bill Belichick would even pick up the phone. But Mike Vrabel, same as Rex Ryan. You know, alpha that's not going to put up with your shit. He's going to bring that attitude back to the Jets defense, which, quite frankly, if you get a defensive coach in there that knows what he's doing, that defense will be right back to where it was. But the identity is they want to run the ball. And this team is set up better than almost any other team to run the ball for the future. Breece Hall, only in his second or third year. Braylon Allen, a rookie. A solid interior offensive line, as we mentioned. And then you're still going to have Devontae. You're still going to have Garrett Wilson. So who do you bring in as a quarterback? Well, fortunately for the Jets, there's not a ton of other issues on their roster that you would need to address with a top 5 pick. As we mentioned, maybe you could have some safety help, but it's not as pressing. Corners, you feel pretty comfortable. Linebackers, defensive line, offensive line, receivers, running back. Everything feels good. Maybe a tight end, but you're not going to spend a top 5 pick on a tight end. So obviously quarterback. Now, to me, Shedeur Sanders would probably be their ideal choice. However, I'm not sure that actually happens. I feel like Shedeur, which, you know, the Deion thing, I think it's a little overblown. Shedeur's shown that he has high character. You know, Deion Sanders, this isn't a LaMelo and Lonzo Ball with their father. Like, Deion is a Hall of Fame football player, multi-sport athlete, has coached in college at multiple levels, you know, led his teams to, you know, undefeated records, and now Colorado has a chance to make it into the expanded college football playoff in its first year. So it's not like you're getting a guy who's just in street clothes telling him what you should do with their son. Like, this is a guy that's accomplished, so maybe you bring him in. I honestly like Shedeur to the Cowboys with Deion. You know, Jerry has been at his best when he swings big, and that would be probably the biggest swing of his career played for the Cowboys with Jerry Jones as the owner as well, so there's some connection there. You did just pay Dak, but I'm sure you figure out a team. You're telling me the Raiders wouldn't take on that contract to have Dak Prescott? And you could probably eat some of that due to the rookie contract you'd get with Shador. That's a whole nother topic, but the only other guy left is Cam Ward. And Cam Ward in a Jets uniform, while it might sound kind of abstract, makes a little bit of sense. You know, help this young guy come along, control the game with the run game, and just tell him to hit the throws over the middle that he's been so good at. Get a little bit of creativity in there. I honestly think Milroe to the Giants with his identity wanting to be a pocket passer with the strength of his legs. I think Cam Ward with his creative ability going to New York is kind of what they need. That's what they thought they were getting with Aaron Rodgers. You got to rein it in a little bit, but they have the pieces to execute it. Control it with the run game. Bring in Cam Ward. You have got two dynamic receivers on the outside. All of a sudden, you're looking at this team saying, shit, we might not have done it with Aaron, but we could probably do it with Cam Ward. But you need that alpha mentality in the locker room at your head coach. I think Mike Vrabel and Rex Ryan, those are the first two guys you call. And for GM, I think you go coach first, then GM. Let these big personalities dictate who they want calling the shots. You don't want Mike Vrabel and Rex Ryan coaching the team but not going shopping for the groceries. You know, it's not going to work. It didn't work with Bill Parcells. Doesn't work with Bill Belichick. You want these guys to say, okay, go do the research for me, but check in with me before we do anything. I go Rex Ryan, then Mike Vrabel. Those are the two guys. And I think if that happens, I think the Jets will have a quicker turnaround than some people expect, because this season is a season from hell. And you can fire Joe Douglas. You can fire Robert Saleh. But the problem is Aaron Rodgers. And quite frankly, Packers fans probably could have smelt this coming from a mile away. And I'm not going to say that I didn't. I picked them to come in last in the division, so I kind of felt that it was coming. Aaron Rodgers coming off an Achilles injury at 40, where he wasn't even good his last year with the Packers. And his whole game mostly was predicated on, you know, extending plays. Not your run around Patrick Mahomes Allen style, but just breaking the pocket and throwing a rope on the run. He doesn't have that ability. Devon Godchaux, the defensive tackle for the Patriots, said, I'm a big dude and I can run him down. He's just not the same player. I don't think there's any way you can move on with Aaron Rodgers. And a part of the issue is, who's going to take him on now? You know, the Titans? He's not going to go to the Titans. He's not going to go to the Panthers. Maybe the Raiders give him a shot. I don't know. The future looks better for the Jets than it does for Aaron Rodgers. If you're going to clean house like you did with Saleh and Douglas, well, you have to put Aaron in there too, because this was kind of a package deal. And Aaron Rodgers said it. If we don't play well, we are all looking for new jobs next year. And Aaron arguably has been the worst out of all of them, because Joe Douglas went out, got everybody that Aaron wanted. Devontae Adams, Alan Lazard. They beefed up the offensive line. Then Robert Saleh. This team, he was competitive with Zach Wilson, which Jets fans might owe Zach Wilson an apology, considering how this season has gone. So Robert Saleh not acting like he is Tom Coughlin, Mike Tomlin, or Jim fucking Harbaugh. But he had this team competitive with really shitty quarterback play. And when you fired him, you were only 2-3. It's not like you were 3-8 like you are now. Like, no, you still had a fighting chance, especially of what we've come to see as a weak AFC with the Bengals struggling. The Dolphins, Tua was hurt. The Jaguars, dog shit. The Colts, nobody really takes them super seriously. This would have been your year, and you could have snuck in at 9-8. And I felt like that was a possibility with Robert Saleh, but obviously since firing him, you're 1-5. It's a shit show. So clean house. Get rid of all of them. And if Devontae's got his feelings hurt that you fired Aaron Rodgers, then get the fuck out too. And that's what Mike Vrabel and Rex Ryan, that's the attitude that they're going to bring. And that's exactly what the Jets need. They need to stop getting all this hype and just have somebody get in that locker room and grind out this mentality and bring in that attitude of, listen, we're going to kick ass and take names later. And we don't give a fuck about the media. We don't give a fuck about what our star, quote unquote, quarterback wants us to do. Oh, we're going to go out, play winning football. And if we got to run it 40 times, fine. But if we got to pass it 50 times, we need a guy that can do that. And Aaron Rodgers just can't nowadays. So, interesting how that's going to progress throughout the offseason. Excited for those two storylines. And really excited kind of jumping into the college football scene now. What quarterbacks are going to kind of get their draft stock back up? Because we mentioned Shador, we mentioned Cam Ward, we mentioned Jalen Milroe. But a couple other quarterbacks that were touted as being top prospects coming into the season have struggled. Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers, Georgia and Texas. Quinn Ewers, 5-star prospect coming out of high school. Carson Beck obviously was the number 1 ranked quarterback coming into this year. His stock has plummeted. Quinn Ewers has shown he can't stay healthy. And this Texas team is so loaded that you would think he'd be having a Heisman-type year over the past 2 seasons. Just quite doesn't look right to me. But if these two guys can have a big college football playoff, they will crumple up that shit and throw it out the window because recency bias is a real thing. And if Carson Beck's going to throw 12 interceptions over the past 6 games, but he's going to go on a 5-game tear like he did in the second half against Alabama, then people are going to look at him in the first round again and say, wow, this guy's pretty mentally tough, which is an underrated attribute that you need at quarterback. So excited to see that all break down and how that factors into the first round. But touching on college football playoff, we're getting close. We're only a couple weeks away from conference championships. Obviously, big game this Saturday between Indiana and Ohio State. Big Ten matchup. Whoever wins this game is most likely playing Oregon, barring Oregon just destroying their record over the next 2 weeks. It'll be the Big Ten championship. So, big game coming up Saturday. Definitely check that out in Ohio State. That's going to be exciting. But this new 12-team playoff, this is exactly what we were excited for, is how it's going to all play out. And are we going to see Cinderella teams? And we're already seeing that kind of take shape with Boise State and Colorado and Indiana. So right now, these are my shoo-ins for the college football playoff. You got Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Bama, and Georgia. Those are the 6 teams I feel really good about making it. Obviously, Oregon and Ohio State are going to play each other most likely, unless Indiana wins. But those are the teams that are going to play each other in the Big Ten championship. So you can probably point them in automatically. Oregon for sure, as they're undefeated. So even if they lost in the Big Ten championship, they only have 1 loss and they beat a couple high-ranked teams. So you feel good about that. Ohio State, Penn State. These 2 teams, even if they have 2 losses, it's similar to Bama and Georgia. It's like they're some of the best 12 teams in the college football landscape. You're not going to leave them out. And then Texas, Bama, and Georgia. Texas only has 1 loss. Now they do play Texas A&M coming up next week, which is a big game because now it's an SEC matchup. So this can affect who plays in the SEC championship, where this is where it all gets fucking crazy. Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, A&M, and Tennessee all have 2 losses. And their conference championship or their conference record is all the same as well. Now, if Texas wins out, they will be in the SEC championship, obviously, because they'd only have 1 conference loss, and that was to Georgia. Where it gets tricky is if Georgia wins out, they'll probably play Texas. Now, if they lose to Georgia, or excuse me, if Georgia loses to Texas, they'll have 3 losses, but it'll be to Texas twice and Alabama. Can you really fault them for that? As they beat Ole Miss and they beat Texas. Oh, wait, who'd they lose to the second time? I'm spacing it. Either way, Bama would only have 2 losses. Ole Miss would only have 2 losses. A&M, now if they lose to Texas, they would have 2 losses. But if they win against, or 3 losses, but if they win against Texas, Now you're looking at the damn top 8 teams in the SEC, all with 2 losses. And then Tennessee's still hanging around there like, hey, we beat Alabama. Like, can't write that off. So to me, right now, the for sure shoo-ins for the SEC is Texas, Bama, and Georgia. And I will say, if Bama and Georgia play at their max effort, if Bama plays like they did in the first half against Georgia and the full game against LSU, and if Georgia plays like they did in the second half against Bama and in the first half against Texas, there's no reason to think that these two teams won't meet up in the college football playoff in the semifinals or in the championship game. And if they do face each other, to me, it's similar to last year with Michigan and Alabama. That game, as it was one of the semifinal games, was really the national championship because whoever won that game was going to win the Natty. To me, Georgia and Bama, they play at their max capacity. They are the 2 best teams in college football. And to me, it's not even close. I just don't see, as good as Oregon's been, as good as Ohio State can be, Texas, they're loaded. Best roster in college. Bama and Georgia, they just are different when they're playing well and when they're playing to their best ability. But right now, so we got Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. That's 3. 4, 5, 6 with Texas, Bama, and Georgia. All right, Notre Dame, they're probably going to win out. They play Army, and then they play USC. So that's not a lock that they're going to win out, but you assume that they're probably going to win those 2 games. So that's 7. You got Ole Miss and Tennessee. You know, that 8 and 9, A&M, if they win 8 and 9. So you kind of got 2 SEC teams, but also factor in Indiana. So out of Ole Miss, A&M, and Tennessee and Indiana, you're probably only getting 2 of those teams. Obviously, it's whoever wins out pretty much. Indiana got a good shot, even if they only lose this game. They're only going in with 1 loss, so you probably get in there. And then a team like Ole Miss, you feel confident. It's like, all right, they beat Georgia, they beat LSU. Those are pretty decent wins. They'll probably make it in. Then that leaves A&M and Tennessee kind of on the outside looking in. That Tennessee and Ole Miss, I think between those 2 teams, there's going to be a lot of pissed off fans on either side. Like FSU last year, like, what do you mean? We went undefeated. Tennessee is like, we beat Alabama. Ole Miss is like, dude, we beat LSU. Like, come on, man. We beat, oh my gosh. Who did they play 2 weeks ago? I can't remember it. Dang it. Tennessee, right? Either way, I'm getting off track. So that gives us 9 teams. And the 3 other teams, we got the ACC championship, or the ACC championship is going to be in there. The Big 12 champion is going to be in there. And then the Power 5 conference, you know, the teams with Army and Navy, Boise State, UNLV. Boise State seems like they're going to take it. So you got Boise State in there. That's 10. And then the Big 12 championship and the ACC championship. Right now, as the records go, Miami has a good chance to win out, which would move their conference record to 7-1, going up against SMU. Whoever wins that's going to be in. I'm leaning Miami because they got the quarterback, but either one of those teams is going to make it. Clemson, they're kind of a wild card, but that loss the other week really hurts them to, I think it was Pittsburgh. Like, that's tough. Or, no, excuse me, it was to Louisville, and they lost to Georgia earlier in the season. Can't completely write them off. But then in the Big 12, you got Colorado and BYU. And the fun thing about the Big 12, I have the most confidence in Colorado. BYU has been similar to the Chiefs, just barely winning these games, except the Chiefs have the pedigree to back it up. BYU, it's like, are you a flash in the pan? Possibly. Colorado, best quarterback in college football, best player in college football, and the coaching staff. I mean, look at, you got Dion, you got Warren Sapp, you got Pat Shermer. Like, these are NFL quality guys that you're coaching this team. They've seemed to rally around their identity, which is, we're not going to take any shit. And everybody wanted to write us off after we lost to Nebraska, but look at us now, stringing out wins. The only thing with the Big 12, if BYU loses, which they play Arizona State, which is an underrated game this week, Whoever wins that game will be playing in the Big 12 championship most likely. So if Arizona State wins that game, you're looking at Colorado versus Arizona State. And Iowa State has a chance where if Colorado loses, Iowa State could sneak in there if they went out and play Arizona State, and one of those teams would get in. A couple wild cards to me, though. Army, if they went out, would be undefeated. They'd have to beat Notre Dame this week, which would be a huge win. And then I'm assuming they'd play a team like Navy for their conference championship. You feel good. I would love to see Army undefeated. If they go undefeated, which would mean they beat Notre Dame, you got to put Army in. No doubt about it. They would have the pedigree. They'd have the wins. That would be really fun to see. The other one, even though they have 3 losses, South Carolina, they have been on a heater. They beat, let me look at this up real quick because they've got some big wins this season. I know they barely lost to Alabama, which was one of the crazier games, but they've beat Missouri while they were ranked. They beat Vanderbilt, who beat Alabama and gave Tennessee, they gave somebody else a run for their money. They beat Texas A&M handedly, who was ranked 15. They whooped Oklahoma. They barely lost to Alabama on a crazy play. They barely lost to LSU in the beginning of the year. They whooped Kentucky, which has given plenty teams a run for their money. So if something crazy happens where Notre Dame loses out, Indiana loses out, kind of where it leaves the window open for a 3-loss team, and if South Carolina can do that, because their next 2 games, let's see, they play Clemson to finish the season. So if they went out, they'd be 10-3 or 9-3 with wins over Texas A&M, Clemson, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kentucky. Those are good SEC teams, and they're playing hot. It's kind of like if the Bengals won out and made it to the playoffs, you're like, well, they've been playing pretty good football all year. Watch out. I'd love to see South Carolina sneak in. Guys, this is going to be so exciting. I'm so excited for this damn playoff. This is what we wanted out of football. The NIL, the transfer portal with guys not worrying about sitting for 2 years just to play on a championship contender like Georgia and Alabama, where they'll say, all right, well, I'll go be a starter at Tennessee, or I'll go be a starter at Indiana instead of playing at Ohio State and waiting for 2 years. I'll go play right away. You're seeing the talent disperse. You're not seeing that Clemson team back with Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, or those Alabama squads with just NFL players at every single position year after year, or the Georgia team more recently, where they had back-to-back years of just straight-up NFL quality defenses. The talent has dispersed, and it's just led us to way more exciting football. This has been one of the best college football seasons I've ever seen. But to me right now, I don't know how the brackets would work out. I don't know the structure of all that. But to me, right now, if I had to pick the 2 teams that are playing in the national championship, it's Georgia and Alabama. And man, what a fucking awesome storyline that would be, as that game that we saw earlier in the season between those two was the best game of the year. By far, one of the best college games I've ever seen. And you'd get to see that in the national championship. To me, those teams, if they get to the championship, it's because they're playing their best football. That would be a hell of a matchup. So that's what I'm rooting for. But I want to see a team like Boise State get in there. I'd love to see Army go and do some damage. And Notre Dame has a great chance to finally back up some of the bias that they get year after year, where they're kind of like the blue balls of the college football landscape, where, you know, you get teased, you think you're going to fucking nut, and then you lose to NIU. And it's like, oh my gosh, and you just got to go home and beat off. That's what fucking Notre Dame has been throughout my lifetime, where it's like, well, yeah, like, you've done everything. You went out, you bought her drinks, you flirted with her, you spit some smooth game, you got back to the fucking house, you're making out, she's ready, she's taking off her clothes, and then you can't get a fucking boner. That's what Notre Dame has been. So they have a chance to now say, no, we're rock hard and we're ready to fuck. So we'll see how it all goes. Guys, enjoy your night. Hope you stay safe out there. Enjoy Thursday Night Football between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. And like and subscribe. Peace out.